we will forward fund, and we'll forward purchase and we'll forward fund. We are not developers. I think a couple of points. The first one is that low yield environment that we're sitting in today is making residential more appealing. I fully support that and agree. If you want to get scale into the sector today, you have to forward fund, because the ability to procure assets that are existing in scale doesn't happen. Now, there's 4 million people living in the private rented sector, the majority of whom's landlord will be one individual, and if they're lucky, they might have 3 properties. So I can't transact with 1 million different people. I've got to actually build the type of stock that I want. How do we go about doing it, and how do we de-risk it? We've got, as a house, at the moment, we did a count last week, we've got about 900 million of forward fundings going on across every different real estate sector. And it's because in order to find value, we're going to have to produce that product itself. So we've got a lot of experience of it. We've got a very large team that all they do is just do the development of it. But we are not the developer. You have to remember that. And this is about de-risking it. So the developer has got a contract with us to procure a building for a fixed price, a fixed fee for a period of time. And if they do not do it, they will get penalised for it. They themselves will have a construction firm on the hook who also have that same restriction, both of whom have got to pass our covenant tests. So how risky do we see actually building it? Clearly there are risks involved with it. Typically, if you look at residential versus commercial, where the forward funding model I think has come from, you actually see the biggest risk is the letting risk, because people are worried about building a spec development. So they're going to get one tenant, an M&G, to take the whole building of however many 100,000 square feet. In residential, the granularity of the individual means that risk is diminished significantly. So if you look at it from it's a contractual risk, it's a counterparty risk of who's going to develop it. We have got the capacity, and we can, if we want to, actually be the developer ourselves. So we've got the skill set to do it. Typically, any fund structure we have will take up to 20% development risk. But that is a safety net, and that is a safety net for when developments go wrong, and they do go wrong, and it does happen. Developers go pop, we all know that. We then have the capacity to bring that development requirement, that skill set, in-house and then do it ourselves. But it's not something we seek to do as an initial phase. It's a safety valve.
You know, just picking up from the point earlier on, he said that the demand for new homes in London and the UK was so huge. How can a developer go bust in London in that sense, or not do the right product? And I think that's part of the problem as well, in terms of trying to find developers that are doing products that are really differentiated in that sense. They're really looking more at the experience of the occupier in terms of trying to do a product that really is more innovative or differentiated. But I mean, you know, do they need to here in London? Do they need to?
That's exactly the point. I think for the last 12 months they didn't, and sales rates have really started to slow down. And these guys have bid off land values which are quite aggressive. They've got quite expensive debt because they're developing. It's quite high risk from a bank's perception. As a result, they're now looking at these larger schemes. So if you've got 1,000 properties and you can sell 100 to 200 per year, you're in that scheme for 5 to 10 years. And if absorption rates start to change, suddenly you're in a very different position from your return on capital employed. So suddenly M&G, Patrizia, whoever it might be, pop up and say, I'll take 100 flats away from you, 200 flats. Suddenly we can let much faster than you can sell. And so A, we're not competing with their existing scheme, so we don't depress their land value, we don't compete with them. And then B, we place make, so we end up in a position where suddenly our 200 flats are occupied, there's cars, the retail starts doing well, the gym's occupied, and their whole scheme looks a little bit more attractive to them. Those conversations have now, they were fruitless 18 months ago, they're now becoming fruitful, so that is changing. So I think we'll see some developers and house builders engaging with institutions in the next 6 months.